Before I begin, let me preface this real quick. I'm gonna say something that is really controversial, and I'm fully aware a lot of people are not really gonna agree with my opinion on this one. What that opinion is that Tyler the Creator is one of the few hip hop artists we have left. Why do I even have the right to say that? We need to make a quick distinction real quick about a hip hop artist and a rapper. Now, many people think that rap is hip hop, and for the most part, that was true, especially during the early development of rap, because we have to, think about one thing real quick before we move forward. What is hip hop? If we think about the OG days back from the foundation of hip hop was founded on 4 different pillars. The first being the DJ. The DJ was the one who was the life of the party, who was mixing the entire time, who was getting the crowds hyped and amped up, who was the people who found out how to use break beats and use that to make a party amp up even more. And the people who utilized the break beats were the break dancers, or the breakers, or more commonly known nowadays as the b-boys. Those were the ones who keeping the life of the party going over and over and over again. If the DJ was the heartbeat, then the breakers were the blood flowing through the system. But then there's 2 other key pillars. One of the other pillars right now that we're not going to really focus on in this segment is the third being graffiti. Graffiti and tagging is a big staple in the hip hop community, and it's kind of how people were able to, translate this culture without having to be heard or seen, more kind of the interpretations of the art itself. But the final one was the MC. MC was extremely important and was for the most part revolutionized hip hop into what it is today, and kind of why we have rappers as it is. So why is Tyler the Creator one of the few hip hop artists we have left? To move into this, we have to think about some of the biggest OGs in hip hop and kind of why Tyler the Creator is an analog for them in the current era and why it's so important. I want to focus more so on the MCing portion right now. Let's think about the original MCs. I'm talking about, Flavor Flav. I'm talking about all the old school cats that we used to have. The people that you would hear on top of a record saying, hey, and shout out this dude, shout out that dude, hey, throw your hands up in the air. All the kind of ad-libs that we're used to hearing, where they originated from, was on top of the beat. The beat was the most important part, and the ad-libs on top were just to amp people up. That was a crucial part of hip-hop, and what really changed a lot of things. And again, I'll focus on why Tyler the Creator is one of the few hip-hop artists right now, especially with his most recent album. But you have to understand, MCing originally wasn't about how your lyrics, how quick you can spit, but more so how you can keep the crowd amped up and keep them going. But another thing about hip-hop is that hip-hop was about being rebellious and essentially being the best performer you can be, regardless of what character you're playing. And that's going to play an important role in just a minute. But let's focus on the rebellion standpoint. Hip-hop was punk. Punk was hip-hop. And you saw this in the early crowds of a lot of the early clubs. A lot of the punks used to be at hip-hop clubs. A lot of hip-hop people used to be at punk clubs. Because what was this whole thing about? It was about rebelling against what society thought this is how people should act in their normal day-to-day thing. Before hip-hop and rap was the staple in culture, it was the original counterculture. We have people like NWA who incited a lot of discontent with how government was run. You had people like Run DMC who really changed the framework of how rap can even be done. And even, we have to give him credit, MC Hammer was also one of the few people that showed in his rebellious nature, not only to hip-hop in general, but to music, that rap can honestly be something that's really prevalent in culture. So again, why is Tyler the Creator, why is he now one of the major people in hip-hop and one of the few artists? Let's focus on the rebellion aspect right now. Let's think about way early on into Tyler the Creator's career. And how Odd Future, when they're originally Odd Future, Wolfgang killed them all. Think about it. Our introduction to Tyler the Creator and to the Odd Future brand in general was Yonkers for most people. It was him legitimately eating a cockroach on video camera and legitimately throwing up because of how disgusting it was. People thought it was absolutely terrible to watch on screen. How dare they promote this sort of vile behavior, record it, and show it to the world.
And fuck Bill O'Reilly.
And fuck Bill O'Reilly, and at that time,
O'Reilly.
fuck Bruno Mars. But for different reasons. And
no fucking walking trash like.
exactly. Yonkers was such a staple in the hip-hop community and just rap in general because it was these new kids who weren't afraid of shocking the culture. And that was super important because that's what hip-hop originally was. All of our major players within the hip-hop community, all the major groups, it shocked the culture every single time. It forced people to pay attention to what's going on because it's what the kids were talking about, and more importantly, it's what the parents were afraid that their kids were listening to. Remember, parental advisory labels were slapped onto records not because of rock, not because of metal, it was because of hip-hop. It was because the lyrics they said were too risque, or they painted the pictures that these people lived in their hometowns, the destruction of the ghettos, how terrible it was, and all that kind of. They were reporters, the reporters of the hood. Yonkers was different because it wasn't necessarily Tyler the Creator saying a life story about this is kind of the situation at hand, but it captured that shock and awe factor that hip hop originally had, and because of it, parents hated it night and day. Before we had cancel culture, even Tyler the Creator said it himself. Before people on Twitter were trying to cancel him, he had protests at his shows. There were parents lined up saying this is devil music. If our kids listen to this, they're gonna be terrible people and no one should ever listen to this type of music. It takes a very special type of artist to get people to protest in person instead of online. So
Tyler ran so Lil Nas X could run.
Exactly. Now we're seeing that more often, it kind of build up of people who essentially are trolling America at large and the world at large of what someone should be like. And Tyler the Creator and Odd Future really pioneered that, let me rephrase that. They reintroduced that idea back into hip hop. Because Odd Future, when they first arrived, they were known for being this really off-brand group, saying some really ridiculous lyrics, yes, for shock value, but it worked. It worked and became a global brand. It became more than just music. It became apparel. It became fashion. It became culture. It became one of the best concerts and festivals you can find anywhere.
Loiter Squad.
Exactly. They even had their own TV series that was matching what Jackass used to be and that kind of feeling.
It was Black Jackass.
It was Black Jackass, exactly, Malcolm. But most importantly, it was rebellious. It took everything that culture said it needed to be, and it rocked it to its core. And that's super important because hip-hop needs that. Hip-hop needs and rap needs that. It needs something to shock it every single time, to revitalize it. In the golden era of hip-hop, we had that constantly. Back and forth. There was a new group. No one could stand at the mountaintop for longer than 2 years because someone else would show up and have their new version of shock value. Let's think about NWA just for a moment real quick. When they arrived on the scene, absolutely changed the fucking game. But then there was only so much more they can do. Ice Cube separated, then started doing his own thing. Then his own shock value as an individual was able to shatter a lot of things. When he did West Side Connection, that was also a new introduction to different type of music, different type of shock value, shaking the core of hip hop. Then Dr. Dre did the same thing with Death Row Records and then eventually with Aftermath. This is what hip hop is. It's shaking the core and the foundation of what's going on. And that's honestly what Tyler the Creator is doing and has been doing for so many years. Let's think about his albums in general. Bastard itself, as just even being named Bastard, was considered controversial. Absolutely changed how people perceive how music can be advertised, and for a long while a lot of people tried to follow in his footsteps. He created, in such a short age and very young age, he created mini Tylers, similar to how Jay-Z has a lot of mini versions of Jay-Z's walking around, and a lot of the big names do as well. Then moving forward into Cherry Bomb, very different, very drastic approach compared to Bastard. Then comes out with Igor. Very fucking different. And Igor is also an important aspect we'll get into in a moment. And then now with Call Me When You Get Lost. It's the reintroduction of, again, rebellious nature. We haven't heard an album where a DJ is speaking on top of the track for a major release. But DJ Drama, even though he's only named a couple times on some of the tracks, he's all over the damn album. You're hearing ad-lib over ad-lib over ad-lib. What he's saying isn't the focal point of the song, but it's supposed to amplify it. Again, taking that old school style of the DJ and reintroducing it and then shaking the entire landscape of hip hop. Now on to more of the performance aspect of it. You know, people say that characters are overrated and not done appropriately. But in all honesty, Tyler the Creator is one of the most well-respected person for having multiple characters throughout his albums. Let's think about it. He's had Wolf. He has had Igor. He's had Wolf Haley. And all the plethora of different characters in between. And you know them because of their voice. How different the approach is. The lyrics that they say. And you may be thinking, well, that isn't hip-hop. You know, that's just him trying to play pretend. Think about it. You know, it may not be the most, what's the best way to phrase it? The most hardcore hip-hop personalities. But even the Humpty Hump. That was a character that was super fucking prevalent all across.
Tupac went to theater school.
Being a different character and presenting it in a different way than you normally would in your normal voice is something that was kind of staple in the foundation of hip hop. And you've seen this in many different groups throughout the early ages that they're originally, you know, they were part of kind of the hip hop version of what a boy band would be. You know, it was about being more suave and sexy. Dr. Dre used to wear a silk suit on stage, singing ballads about love and shit before he became the gangster rapper, before he became this founder of, you know, every foundation that we have and revolutionized hip hop as it is. He wore a silk suit, doctor's outfit in all purple on the DJ turntables. Being a character was part about being a rapper and more importantly about being a hip hop artist because they were trying to be a performer first. They were trying to show that this is a different aspect. Even NWA, as much as we highly respect them, not all of them were real full-fledged gangsters. Ice Cube is known to be one of the heaviest lyricists that we have, but in all honesty, he was the good one out of the entire batch. He's the one who went to school. He's the one who had the most education. He reported on the lives that Eazy-E led, that Dr. Dre was affiliated with, that MC Ren saw, that Doc Dre had to deal with. He reported on their lives and played this character of a gangster rapper. But because of his reputation and who he's affiliated with, no one really questioned it. So being a character is kind of something it's something that the hip-hop community in general has always accepted and is always kind of expected, but we never really brought it up. But Tyler the Creator has taken that idea and ran with it throughout his entire career. Each one of these different characters he plays is a different voice that he wanted to experiment with, and from that, we've seen the evolution of Tyler the Creator and his batch of characters that he really has. And in all honesty, that's as hip-hop as you can get, because to be able to be different people and to be able to convey those messages so well and it to be received as, yeah, this is totally fine, this is kind of what we'll rock with, is really surprising. Because think about it, who else is really capable of doing that in the modern era? In all honesty, the only person I can think about would be Kendrick Lamar and being K-Dot, Kung Fu Kenny, Pulitzer Prize winning Kenny. But his cast is very limited. Very excellently done and done to probably perfection, but there's very few characters that we have in hip-hop. But somehow, in some way, Tyler the Creator throughout his entire career, from his introduction, was able to be this shock and awe factor, was able to be this rebellious voice that hip-hop needed, and was able to do it in so many different ways along the way. Either it be this very horrorcore aspect version of him that's singing these very off-branded lyrics that it's hard for people to listen to nowadays, to being more of this emotion, sensual, kind of really, really thoughtful and sensitive version of himself. But still he's able to navigate that in the same track and come back to Tyler the Creator. Hip hop is his focus, and even in interviews too, you see his performance. They're honestly what hip hop used to be. His Lollapalooza performance, the most recent one, shows that he is hip hop personified. When's the last time you've been to a rapper show and they put on a show, a full-on performance with set design, a whole story that's being told throughout it? It's been a long time since we had that. But think about the greatest performers that we had on stage. That was commonplace. It wasn't just them on a mic and, rapping their songs like they do at every single show. They were full-on productions. Full-on productions. Again, think about NWA. When they had to sing, or when they had to perform Fuck the Police in the absolute height of its controversy, they had the chain link fence in the back. They had the garbage bins on the side. They had the taggings on the wall. They had a full-on set production. But that's the reason why that moment was so revolutionary. Because not was it just a way for them to fight against police and fight against the government during, a lot of racial tension and what would lead into the Rodney King riots. But at the same time, what they were saying was amplified by the surrounding around them. Because they showed, this is our hood. You may never been to Compton. You may never been to Watts. You may never been to East LA. But on this stage, you see the neighborhood we grew up in. Tyler the Creator has shown parts of his life too, in the more intricate aspects. Where NWA showed the hood and how it really looks like, and in past performances, Tyler was able to show that, yes, I'm from the suburbs, but at a Grammy performance, he showed it on fire, showing that even though the suburbs may be this nice glam and perfect cookie cutter, in the words of the Weeds intro, pretty little boxes, little ticky-tacky little boxes, that isn't the perfect setup that people expect it to be. And in all honesty, the suburbs aren't as nice as they are. They may be this nice, pristine, clean streets, but there's heroin epidemics. There are drug overdoses. There are rampant alcohol abuse. And to show the suburbs on fire really personifies that. Because in the areas that he resided in within Los Angeles, Santa Clarita Valley, which is known to be this perfect little town, awesome town as coined it. In all reality, there's a lot of dark undertones that reside in there. And even just showing that on stage, showing that this idea of perfection isn't really perfect. Again, that rebellious nature, showing what's truly inside of these neighborhoods, same as what we've seen from the beginning of hip hop, was reporters of this is what people live like. This is the world that they live in. Regardless of whether the news will let you see it, we will tell you what life is like there. And whether it be, showing off that, hey, I got this boat, it's super dope, or showing that this symbol of perfection that people think it is really isn't as great as it seems, Tyler the Creator is there to show that on stage. And is there to talk about that on his albums. Showing the horror elements, the deep dark thoughts that people have in their head, showing the vulnerabilities that even fame has created and how disastrous it makes relationships, and from romantic to just simply friends. Tyler the Creator has shown so much vulnerability and so much more than just that. And in all honesty, we don't see that in hip hop. We don't see that from a lot of rappers. It's a lot of, ironically speaking, a lot of rappers show the suburbs. This perfect, glam, outlandish lifestyle that has no issues and no wrongdoings. But Tyler the Creator is willing to show that it's really a burning building when you look deep down inside of it. We don't have many people that are willing to go and push up that ante. And for those reasons, that's why I argue Tyler the Creator is one of the few hip-hop artists we have left. He may not have been born in that era, but with his appreciative music and understanding what his voice needs to do, he really is our generation's analog for that. He's our avatar for this. Hip hop is still alive and kicking, but ironically, it's not from one of the OGs. It's from one of the newest voices and one of the most commanding voices we have right now.